The club you are about to join has a personality, and it has a purpose. And this personality is a collective of all of our membership, and its purpose is carried out by the collective activity of all of our members. It's reflective of the life and character of a man by the name of Paul Harris, who is the founder of the Rotary Clubs. Paul Harris was born in 1868 in my home state of Wisconsin, in the little town of Kenosha. His family ran into some financial difficulties, and it was a family decision that they should send their two sons to live with their grandparents in Wallingford, Vermont. When Paul Harris arrived in Wallingford, Vermont at the age of 5, he was a normal, rambunctious kid. And he said to his grandmother one time, "You're not my mother, and I'm not going to always do what you tell me to do." And his grandfather said, "Paul, let's go out to the woodshed and have a little talk," and straightened him out. I mention this because it's important that Paul, being raised by his grandparents, later on developed a specific personality, a personality that he himself says is based upon friendliness, being friends with people. It's based upon tolerance, being tolerant of people. Not everybody thinks the way you do. Not everybody wants to act the way you do. You have to accept tolerance. And thirdly, he said, my grandparents taught me a sense of compassion. A sense of compassion means never nourish grievances, never feed off of unhappiness, never cherish bitterness. Go beyond grievances. Go beyond bitternesses. Have compassion. Well, eventually Paul went to the University of Vermont, and he still had a little bit of this youthful characteristic about him, and so he was summarily dismissed, not because of academic reasons, but because he didn't follow the rules, so to speak. Well, that wasn't the end of his educational endeavors. His grandmother always wanted him to go to college and be educated. And so she had, over the years, put aside what she called, and what, if you're in a farming community, knows as your egg money. She sold eggs on the side and put the profits in a little nest for Paul's future education. Well, eventually he did graduate from the University of Iowa, 1891. This was a benchmark event in his life because he remembered not so much what he had learned in the classroom, but what he had learned from the graduation speaker. Now, I don't know about you, I don't know how many times you have gone through graduation ceremonies and listened to speakers droll on and on. Frankly, the last graduation I ever attended was my high school graduation, and I've been through many since then. But this is what Paul retained from this graduation speaker. First, be a person of great vision. Not tunnel vision, but broad vision. Get to know the world. If you're going to have this vision, you have to have a whole world vision. In this process, you have to understand yourself, where you fit into this grand scheme of things which we call our life and our world. Well, with this behind them, and remember we talked about at the very beginning, the personality of our club is the collective personality of Paul Harris. Great vision, knowing the world, understanding where you fit. So rather than handing out his lawyer shingle, he went on a 5-year hiatus. Students call this the gap year. His lasted 5 years. He had very many experiences during this time. He worked as a cowboy. He worked as an actor. He worked as a newspaper reporter. One time he answered an ad in the Philadelphia paper that said, "Wanted, deckhands, a cattle boat going to England." 2 days later, Paul Harris was on a cattle boat working down in the hold, but he was on his way to develop this getting to know the world attitude. Well, after this 5-year period, he decided maybe I better get down to brass tacks and do a little productive work. So he opened a law office in Chicago in 1896. And he was quite successful with it. But he was not totally happy because he didn't seem to have this feeling of friendliness in the community. One night he went out to dinner with one of his clients who had invited him home. And after dinner, the client said, "Well, let's take a little walk around the neighborhood." And he was impressed by the fact that the client met people on the street, called them by name, asked some questions about how their family was doing. And he said, "Why can't we have this sort of an attitude in our business world? Is business only business, or is it being a part of the community?" And so he got the idea that maybe we could get together with a group of friends and try to establish this community relationship and this friendliness between people. So on February 25th, 1905, in the Unity Building in Chicago, he got together with several individuals. One was Sylvester Shealy, who was a coal dealer. One was a Gustav Lawyer, who was a mining engineer. Another member was Hiram Story, who was a tailor. Now, you notice that these were not lawyers. These were other occupations, other professions, other ways of building this community. And so they had their first meeting. They decided, well, let's have another meeting. So the second meeting, they invited a fellow by the name of Harry Ruggles. Now, I love Harry Ruggles because Harry Ruggles was a printer but he was also a singer. And he brought singing to the Rotary Club. This is one of my favorite times of the Rotary meeting. Why is it my favorite time? Because for the 30 or 40 or 50 seconds that we sing Smile, or I'm looking over a four-leaf clover, we're all on the same plane. We're all equal. We put aside our prejudices. We forget about our worries. It's a happy time. Well, with this foundation, the idea of having Rotary clubs expanded. In 1908, there were 2 clubs formed in San Francisco. Paul himself took a train from Chicago to San Francisco. Only took 2 days to get there. But he helped organize a club in San Francisco. 1909, there was a club formed in Oakland, California. About this time, some of Paul's lawyers' friends in the East, who had kind of poo-pooed the idea of getting a club that includes many classifications, many professions, began to see the success of the operations taking place on the West Coast. So in 1910, there was the first convention of Rotary clubs. Paul Harris was not the first president of a Rotary club. He was the first president of Rotary clubs. In 1912, the name of the organization is called International Association of Rotary Clubs. And as already been mentioned, in 1987, women were allowed. Now, where does the word Rotary come from? They started to rotate from one business office to the next business office, and they rotated the meeting places. Eventually, this got to be a bit cumbersome, but the idea of Rotary had become ingrained in the philosophy. So they adopted the wheel as a symbol of the club, symbol of clubs. This wheel has 24 cogs, 6 spokes, and a key. Do you know what the key is in relation to a wheel? If you've ever changed the wheels on your riding lawnmower, you know when you take the bolt off, you have to slide a little metal bar out, because that little metal bar fits in a slot. There's a slot on the wheel, and there's a slot on the drive shaft. And that key locks the drive shaft to the wheel. So when the wheel turns, the drive shaft does work. This is what Rotary does. When the rotary wheel turns on the drive shaft, which may be a project within the club or in the community or international, and you'll hear about some of these things, work is accomplished. And as a member of the club, you're a little nanoparticle riding on one of those cogs, but you're a part of this wheel that gets things done. What about the Rotary Club of Fayetteville? The idea was brought forth in 1918, which was only 13 years after the first meeting in 1905. A committee was formed. They looked into the prospect of getting a club in Fayetteville. The chairman of the committee died, and without leadership, things do not necessarily work out. The idea was then revised in 1920, and in 1921, on March 1st, the Rotary Club of Fayetteville was chartered. The first president was Henry Tovey. Henry Tovey was a music professor at the University of Arkansas. You can see why we have the heritage of singing in our club. Since 1921, and we're getting ready to celebrate our 100th anniversary, and just 3 years down the road, I wish I would be able to be there. Maybe I will, probably not. Rotary Club has left a tremendous mark on Fayetteville. Usually on Thursday mornings, I take a walk at Gully Park before I come to Rotary meeting. I cross the bridge. There's a little metal plaque sponsored by the Rotary Club of Fayetteville. I've had occasion to visit a patient at Washington Regional Hospital. And to buy a little time, I walked the trail around the hospital. There's a marker that said, "This trail, Rotary Club of Fayetteville." You go out to the Botanical Garden and you'll see a Rotary Peace Arch sponsored by the Rotary Club of Fayetteville. We don't do a lot of bragging. We don't generate a lot of publicity, but the Rotary Club gets things done. Now let's go back to principles for a minute. Rotary is based on the premise that there is a broad field of agreement between people and among people of different beliefs, different cultures, different backgrounds, and different experiences. Our club has all those characteristics. If you get to know some of the people, you'll see what a broad range of experience we've had. Members of our club are in various professions. They've served in various activities. They've been all over the world. Collectively, we have this broad vision. And collectively, we understand ourselves and where we fit. So we welcome you to this club because you're going to be able to bring friendship. You're going to be able to bring tolerance. You're going to be able to bring compassion, all bundled up in the same service above self. Thank you. Yeah.